Apparently, it's customary to begin these things with the closing of a car boot. There we are then.
This is Partners in Crime with Adam Croft and Robert Dawes.
Well, we're at Books by the Beach, and we are by the beach. If we kind of lean a little bit and look out the window, we can actually see the sea from here. We can see the sea fret coming in anyway.
The sea fret coming in on a Sunday afternoon. I'm hot off the train. The train journey was beautiful, absolutely lovely. Sunny all the way up. Got here.
How long did it take?
It took about 2.5 hours, I think.
That's quicker than driving.
Which isn't too bad. So that was lovely, and it's home from home. I'm sitting here with Adam in the downstairs bar and reception room of the wonderful refurbished Crescent Hotel. I was last here about 11 years ago, and it was very nice then, and it's certainly very nice now. It's in the heart of the town, but it's got lovely views outside. And I think Adam's in the hotel across the road with the swimming pool.
Yes, with the heated indoor pool is where I am, yes. Made full use of that yesterday, that's for sure.
So, yes, here we are for the Literary Festival, Books by the Beach, as we have mentioned, I think a couple of times by now, haven't we?
Yes, Books by the Beach it's called, in case anyone didn't get it.
Yes.
Yeah, just worth mentioning that again. We're going to be going around. We're going to be speaking to readers. We're going to be speaking to authors, crime writers, and just generally soaking up the atmos, aren't we?
Yes, it's a very literary town. I mean, Anne Bronte is buried up at the church by the castle. The great Alan Ayckbourn resides here and has created most of his extraordinary canon of work here. So Stella Rimington's going on in about an hour and a half to give her session, and then Mr. George Costigan, Hugh Fraser, and myself, who will be the quietest of the three, will be on at about 5:15, talking about thrillers, crime and otherwise. So that's what we're looking forward to. We're going to have a little stroll around in a minute. I'm going to see if I can get myself an ice cream, because it's Sunday afternoon. I'm letting my hair down. I don't care.
Well, we are going to try and grab Hugh and George at some point as well, and various other people. But before Bob got here earlier today, I met up with and had a quick chat with the great Barry Forshaw, who is a crime writing expert.
He certainly is. His noir books are sensational.
Yeah, he's an absolute worldwide expert on crime fiction, so I couldn't pass up the opportunity to have a coffee and a chinwag with him shortly after dawn this morning, and here's what he had to say for himself. Barry Forshaw is probably the world's leading crime fiction expert. He's the author of countless books on the subject and regularly appears on TV and radio. Now, Barry, something that's been in the news over the last week or so is that crime fiction and thrillers are now officially the UK's best-selling genre. They're outdoing general fiction and even romance. What makes crime fiction so relevant, and why is it now that it's hit number one, do you think, and why has it become the most popular genre in Britain?
I was surprised that that's been the news, because I understood that happened at least a decade ago, when crime fiction became the most popular genre. So it displaced romance fiction. I think the reason for that then was the fact that the romance authors, the big heavyweight names, there were fewer of them, whereas crime fiction is throwing up big names by the day, by the week. I think it's because crime fiction has now become finally a respectable genre. It started with people like P.D. James, Ruth Rendell, who raised the actual literary level of the writing. It was always good. You had writers like Raymond Chandler and Ross MacDonald, who were terrific writers as well as just crime writers. There's also the fact that everybody loves it. The only people who don't love it are the people I work for, and I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, is the literary editors. Most of the literary editors prefer literary fiction. They'd rather their newspapers could cover the likes of very good writers like Lionel Shriver, who's here at Scarborough at the moment, but they know that their readers want crime fiction. So there's always a job for someone like me who writes about crime fiction.
The lines are being blurred quite a bit as well, aren't they? Like I say, there are quite some kind of literary crime writers out at the moment. I mean, that's something that kind of started with P.D. James, isn't it? So
yeah.
I think those lines are being blurred a bit more. And
they are, although there's still the feeling that it's a slightly sacrosanct genre. So at the moment there's on television was the Agatha Christie adaptation Ordeal by Innocence. Now, Agatha Christie was always seen as someone cosy and safe and unthreatening, and that's how she was played. If you looked at the TV Poirot, the TV Marple, they're almost like end of the pier comedies. They were not to be taken seriously. The acting was larger than life. But the ones that Sarah Phelps has been doing, she's done 3 now, Witness for the Prosecution and the other one and this latest one, are much more serious and grounded and gritty, as if she wants to make it more serious and to be taken more seriously. Not everyone likes it, but I think it's terrific, and I think it's good that the genre is taken seriously. But it's always been the recipient of good writing. So if you look at Dashiell Hammett, for instance, and then look at Hemingway, they're doing the same thing. So the language is pared down, and every sentence makes exactly the right effect. So right at the start of the American genre, not so much the British genre, but you could almost argue that, say, Dorothy Sayers in her later books, the treatment of psychology is as rich and interesting as any literary fiction of the day.
I was reading something else this morning about, there's always something in the papers every other week about what the next Scandi noir is going to be, whether it's going to be, I think a couple of weeks ago I read that South Korean noir is starting to really sort of come into this country, and sort of French and Polish. I mean, something you're probably asked all the time, but what do you think, in your opinion, is the next Scandi noir?
Well, that's quite interesting. My publisher, I've done Euro noir, Scandi noir, Nordic noir, American noir, historical noir, the latest one. So I'm always asked, what's the native genre? Actually, here's the answer. Do you want the answer?
Go on.
There isn't one.
Right.
Because for it to become an actual genre like Nordic noir did, there has to be critical mass. There has to be 4 or 5 authors who are really big, and whose books are selling TV adaptations, which certainly happened with the Scandinavians. It hasn't happened with any other country. There are good French writers. There was a book, a Japanese crime novel, Devotion to Suspect X, that had terrific reviews. But it's kind of like a single, like that phrase, one swallow does not make a summer. There isn't enough to make a genre. But I think people are more interested in European crime fiction now, and there's more, people are prepared to look further afield.
Which is a good thing.
It is indeed, yeah. Although, having said that, there's so much good British and American crime writing now. There's a lot of bad British and American crime writing, but then that was always the case.
You gave me a funny look when you said that.
Nothing personal. It was, if you look back at the golden age of American writing, we think it was Raymond Chandler, Dashiell Hammett, but there's hundreds of writers who were not doing anything good, using exactly the materials that those guys used. And we also forget that when Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler were doing that, they were regarded as, cheap pulp writers. They were not taken seriously. Now they are. We see that as a golden age. But they wrote for Black Mask magazine, which was aimed at GIs. There was no respectability. And in the same way in Britain, everybody liked Agatha Christie, and she had a set respectability. But it really, until P.D. James came along, nobody took crime that seriously.
It's something that's changing now, thankfully.
It is.
Well, we're now standing outside next to a sign that says Queen Victoria, but this time it's actually not a pub. It's it's a statue of the lady herself, and we're looking, well, technically, out to sea.
Well, yes, you could say that. Half an hour ago I visited this spot, and there's a beautiful sunny Scarborough afternoon with the views as far as you could see, and now that sea fret, it's coming over the waters and it's engulfed the bay and the town.
It's kind of more Whitby, isn't it? It's kind of Dracula-ish, the way it's the fret's kind of rolling in here. We can see this waves of mist, and we can't see the sea at all. And
well, it's full of atmosphere, isn't it? We're now here by the old town hall as well.
It's very crimey,
and it's got that sort of. I mean, just up the road is Whitby, of course, where Dracula came into town. So it's got that sort of gothic feel about it. There is certain elements of Scarborough that have that sort of architecture and style, let alone the ancient castle on top of the cliffs. It's a beautiful spot. If only we could see
how
it.
quickly the weather turns. I mean, I was walking around in short sleeves an hour ago, and we were on the beach, and it was very nice and very warm, and it just suddenly turns like this, and the temperature has dropped by probably at least 15 degrees.
And as you say, it can happen just like that. I mean,
Yeah.
I've spent years in this wonderful town filming a television
Doing
series.
the donkey rides, weren't you?
Doing the donkey
But
ride.
of course, you did have another job in Scarborough. It wasn't just a donkey ride.
did.
You,
I put
you also
out
sold
those-
ice creams as well.
I did, and put out those deck chairs. But when I wasn't doing those three things, I was doing a TV series, and we used to be filming in Scarborough, and you start off the scene with a beautiful sunny sky. You'd actually come round to do another shot, and this would come in, and you just couldn't do anything.
No.
You'd have to change the schedule, try and do an indoor scene until it had gone. I mean, it kept us on our toes. But anyway, it's nonetheless very dramatic. Three gulls have just flown by us.
And they're massive. The
perilously
seagulls.
close.
I mean, I come to Scarborough often. I was here about 3 weeks ago. I come 3 or 4 times a year, and it always strikes me how big the seagulls are. They're absolutely massive.
Yes, they're big in Yorkshire. They really are.
It's all the Yorkshire puddings.
It's the Yorkshire pudding, on the subject of which it is Sunday afternoon. I'm going to try and aim for one of those
I was
later
going
on.
to say, yeah, I'm starting to get a little bit peckish and a little bit cold, so
Let's
maybe
head
we
off.
should head off and maybe...
Maybe get the tram. We've got the lovely tramway that leads down to the front, so maybe we'll take that. And
It's an almost vertical tram.
it is. It's
Takes
very
you down
exciting.
down the cliffside there. But yeah, I think we'll head somewhere warm.
Well, here we are at Books by the Beach, as you know, in Scarborough, sitting, as all fine writers eventually do, in the saloon bar. When I say saloon, it's a very, very pleasant hotel bar, to say the very least, and sitting here with our dear friend, Mr. Hugh Fraser. We've just done a panel with his good self and George Costigan, and we're just going to ask Hugh his thoughts about Scarborough, about the festival, and any other ideas he may have to offer our listeners around the globe. Hugh, did you have a nice time this afternoon? It looked as if you did.
Very much so, yes. Peter Guttridge was the moderator.
Very good,
and
wasn't
a
he?
very good writer and an extremely good man moderating a talk between myself, yourself, Robert Dawes, and George Costigan. And I think it went very well.
I mean,
The
there was
audience
this
seemed to
packed
enjoy it.
house, which was lovely.
Yes,
There's a
yes.
big old concert hall in the library there. So, I mean, there was a lovely atmosphere, I thought. So, again, I don't know how you feel, but these festivals around the country seem to be very, very well run by people who are absolutely passionate about books, whether it's just a crime literary festival or like Books by the Beach, spreading its scope to all genres.
Yes.
I mean, we were the crime and thriller element today, but it was very impressive, I thought.
Yes, Lionel Shriver,
Yes,
another guest, fascinating writer to hear.
absolutely wonderful. You had who was in before? Stella Remington.
Yes.
Former Director General of MI5.
Yes, exactly.
Rosie Millard.
Rosie Millard was on earlier.
Mears,
Jeremy
Tony
Vine's been
Parsons.
here.
Tony Parsons, yes.
Yes, so it's been a trip. And Ruth Jones is, as we sit here and talk, up in the Stephen Joseph Theatre in the round, talking about her new book as well. So, yes, have you been to Scarborough much before?
Yes, I've been to the festival once before.
Oh, have you?
A couple of years ago. But I love Scarborough. It is a wonderful town. The beach is just fantastic. We went this morning. We went on a pirate ship trip around the bay, which was a
I've
great
been on
experience.
it many times.
Have you
in the
really?
past. Oh, yes.
We were about to. We wimped out.
Yes.
In the end, it started to turn a little bit cold by the time.
And
we
yet,
we
you're
got
the
to
most
pirate
pirate-looking of all of us.
Well, yes,
So, I mean,
it's the beard.
It's the cutlass.
It's the cutlass and the parrot on my shoulder.
if you move your headphone over one eye, you're away.
Of course, I think one thing that the listeners are going to be dying to know, Hugh, is what you make of the restaurants in Scarborough.
Well, indeed.
We did a Hugh Fraser restaurant review for this
Continuing
episode.
the critique, the national critique of restaurants that Bob and I have been engaged in. Yes, a very, very. I'm trying to think of the name of it. What was it called? The Lanterna. This is an Italian restaurant run by, I think, local people. It is the best Italian food I've ever had outside Italy. It really is superb. It is so popular that we tried to book and couldn't get in.
No.
But it really is well worth a visit if any of your listeners are ever in Scarborough. I'm trying to think of the name of the one we went to this afternoon. Can you remember?
Bonnet.
Bonnet. We had a wonderful Sunday lunch in Bonnet.
This needs to be a regular spot, the Hugh Fraser restaurant review.
Yes, well, Hugh's researcher Sophie is here at his side, feeding him like the President of the United States, feeding him information when he needs it.
But also, for the fish and chip enthusiast or the full English breakfast enthusiast, the Harbour... What is it?
View.
Harbour View. The Harbour View, which, the clue is in the title, it has a beautiful view of the harbour, also gives a very, very reasonably priced full English and a very reasonably priced fish and chips. The fish and chips, I mean, all the critics are wild about the fish and chips. It's top of the ratings in fish and chips in Scarborough. So, again, well worth a visit.
Brilliant. And back to crime, I think. We probably should talk about crime at some point.
Well, we can talk about bad restaurants.
That is a crime.
That is a crime.
I was talking to Barry Forshaw in this very hotel bar this morning, actually, and asking him... is in the news in the last couple of weeks, it's been mentioned that crime fiction is now the best-selling genre in the UK. It's outdone romance, it's outdone literary fiction, and it seems to have just kind of done that in the last year or so. I was wondering what do you think it is about maybe the atmosphere or the situation in the UK at the moment, which means that crime fiction is more relevant now than it ever has been.
Well, I think it must be entirely attributable to Robert and my books.
Yes, it must be. Yeah. And the podcast, of course.
The podcast.
I think it's certainly because the genre is so wide, offering writers so many different areas in which to move. And you have the police procedural, you have the golden mystery age, the Agatha Christie, you have the private detective, Michael Connelly, you have the lone hero, the lead child sort of books, you have the domestic noir, as I believe it's now called, the psychological thriller, Get the Girl on the Train and Gonga and whatever. All these different subgenres themselves are under the umbrella of the overall, crime thriller genre. I mean, there may be people who right within those different ones who disagree, but I think it really does. The old-fashioned, I don't know whether it's old-fashioned, but the reason I've heard very often is that, of course, in times, unsettled times, if you imagine that's what we're living in, and we probably are, people like stories where evil wins over good and there is a resolution, which is very often the outcome of a lot of crime novels, although I've read several recently who actually really work against that particular structure. So I just think it is a very wide-ranging genre, and also that's balanced the fact that you just have to look at our television and you look at our screens, and crime drama is absolutely everywhere. You'll get a War and Peace, won't you, Hugh, I guess, or a Pride and Prejudice, or once, maybe twice a year, or a Howard's End, as a big prestige, drama. You hardly get any adaptations of contemporary literary writers, occasionally Ian McEwan, but you have wall-to-wall crime drama, detective drama, thriller, murder mysteries, from America, from Europe, and of course our own homegrown. So it's not just in the world of books and literature, it's in crime fiction across the board, in all mediums. It's just incredibly popular.
Shall you just blame it on Brexit then?
Well, I do most things, so I guess that fits the bill. And again, I go back, it's because of you and my books. And indeed yours, Adam. Let's not leave you out of this.
Well, no. Yeah. But, the Books by the Beach Festival is actually coming to an end now. The very last session is on. It seems to be a very successful weekend, though.
Well, we're sipping here with our individual libations.
We are indeed.
Hugh has a green tea, I have red wine. You have a furry mic.
Furry mic, yeah. I have a hand free, but unfortunately my beer is over on the next table.
You're sacrificing yourself for this broadcast.
Of course, that's only because I'm green teed out for today. I have had a couple of pots of that already. And,
but can we have an update on Hugh's new book?
Yes, we should. Yes, we heard a little bit in the session about that actually, and I was quite excited to hear that the fourth Rena Walker book that's I think you just finished penning.
Yes, that's right. It's to be published in November, I believe. And yes, it's Rena up to her old tricks, plying her trade in London in 1967 with a visit to Istanbul, where she gets involved with MI6, and also a visit to Spain.
He says with an uncertain look on his face.
It's the green tea, I tell you.
It's the green tea. I don't know what.
Check with the ghostwriter.
Spain was threat. It is. She goes to Greece.
Right.
Sorry. Yes. On the trail of an extremely unpleasant man who is in pursuit of members of his family with evil intent, and she manages to put a stop to that. So.
See, this is interesting. You said something very interesting in the session this afternoon, Hugh, about one of the reasons you write in the 60s, which I thought was a brilliant point to make. And you said there was crime in those days was personality-led, vivid characters, the craze and everything like that. And you made a very good point. I'll let you make it again about how crime has changed in the modern world and doesn't necessarily offer up those sort of personalities, those horrible people, but I mean vivid personalities and great for writers to recreate.
Yes, I think I think nowadays it's more to do with men who sit, or men and women who sit behind screens, plotting evil things and ripping off people's savings and doing completely nasty things. Whereas in the 60s, pre the technological age, it was robbery was a matter of getting out of a car with a shotgun, bursting into a bank, holding people up and taking away bags of cash. And there's a certain sort of excitement to that, should we say, that I don't think is replicated with computer crime.
Well, we have gangs now on one scale, don't we, which are sort of following the pattern of that, which is a whole different
moped crime
world. And I haven't read a crime book set in that particular world, but they must exist. Would Jada? But yes, I agree. I mean, looking at McMafia, that sort of multi-millionaires, and cartels running these crime syndicates, which would be with drugs and murder and intimidation and extortion or whatever, run by these people in distant countries who, you can't. The authorities and the police forces find it very difficult to actually get hold of them. It's because of the fact they don't know who they are most of the time.
Well, the drug trade is a good example. I mean, in the 60s, drugs were imported from Mexico or Africa or wherever, in disguised packages and so forth, and distributed and so forth. Nowadays, they're manufactured in labs in this country, or grown, in greenhouses. And so there isn't the movement, there isn't the rivalry, there isn't the warfare involved that there used to be.
And also, as you said, I mean, the criminal leaders do not strut their stuff in the manner that they did, and want the world to know exactly who they were and instill fear and be a physical presence that everyone knew and avoided if possible. That's all changed. I mean, I think you recreate that world brilliantly, as I've said before, in the books. And if you haven't got stuck into them yet, listeners, please get all three of them, and the fourth one, which is out, as you say, in November.
In November, yes.
And all available on Kobo, of course, who, even though we're not in the studio, we should give a mention to as our sponsors.
Yes, I haven't heard this before. Would you say it again?
You haven't, no. Apparently, they have more than 5 million books available in their online
never read
store.
that many books.
No, I know, but you can get started, because your first one, as a listener to Partners in Crime, you can get 90% off by going to kobo.com, choosing the book you'd like to buy, and entering the promo code CRIME at the checkout. There we go, I've done my bit now.
Well, and if you haven't do that, why not start with Mr. Hugh Fraser's wonderful trilogy, soon to become 4 books. Thanks very much, Hugh. It's lovely talking to you. Until we meet again in some distant town in this country.
It probably won't be long. He's been on 3 episodes out of 13 so far.
Well, yes, he's very popular.
We're going to continue the restaurant survey.
Well, absolutely. Well, actually, we've been approached by the Times to become restaurant tickets. Yeah, the West Dulwich Times, and we're considering it, aren't we?
Yeah,
yes, absolutely.
Acting, writing, restaurant criticism.
Yes. We'll be one of those people on MasterChef sitting there in the room when the nervous, the tasters. Yes.
Apparently, when the food comes out to them, it's all completely cold. It's about an hour and a half or 2 hours after it's been cooked.
It's freezing. I know someone who's
judge food when it's cold.
No, I know.
I know someone who's worked on the show, two people who's worked on the show, and they say that's absolutely true. And I was talking about it the other night, watching the final and thoroughly enjoying myself. I was rather moved, actually. A tear fell down my cheek when Kenny won this year, I think, but it was a very close thing, and his two other chefs were wonderful chefs in their own right too, but Kenny won, and I brought this up, and I came to the conclusion that it must be that the judges must have learnt over the years to be able to eat cold food and imagine what it must be like hot.
Why don't they just put it in the microwave?
Yeah, why don't they just eat it while it's hot?
Well, I suppose against the whole ethos of actually spending 3 hours creating a magical, possible Michelin star meal. If you actually get it out and then just bung it in the microwave. I mean, I would.
That's better than letting it go cold.
You're looking at a pot noodles man here.
Well, anyway, thank you very much to Hugh, our Partners in Crime resident food critic.
We're good at this, aren't we? Yes, thank you.
On that note, I think it's time for another drink.
Cheers. Cheers, Hugh.
Cheers.
Well, I've been waiting for Bob and Hugh to come back from dinner, and they have done that. And in the time-honoured tradition of Partners in Crime, I think we should turn to our resident restaurant critic, Mr. Hugh Fraser, to let us know what he thought of tonight's meal here at the Crescent Hotel in Scarborough.
Absolutely superb. A memorable experience. I began dinner with prawn and smoked salmon, which was delightful. Moved on to the vegetarian alternative, stuffed red peppers with sweet potato fries. And all I can say is get stuffed red peppers.
Was it better than a Turkish in Aberdeen?
Oh, different experience. Chalk and cheese, you can't really compare the two. Just geographically, this is what the 14th northern parallel, and Aberdeen is somewhere in the Arctic, isn't it? So there's a big geographical distance. But no, the crowning glory of this evening's was I asked for a dairy-free pudding, which for reasons I won't go into, and was given the most heavenly experience, meringue, plus sorbet with various exotic fruits and syrups and honeys, and it was just to die for.
Marvellous.
So all hail the Crescent Hotel, Scarborough.
Well, there we go. We heard it here first.
Well, I was sitting opposite him, and of course this is a crime fiction podcast, and I go along with everything that my learned colleague has said about this evening's delightful meal. And the connection with Partners in Crime is when he left the room to go and powder his nose, I laced all his courses with arsenic.
Well, Hugh Fraser, guest on 3 episodes out of 13, and apparently the last.
Well, here we are, late night in the bar at the Crescent. You'll imagine this is where we spend most of our time. But we haven't. We've been out and about with the Books by the Beach Scarborough Literary Festival, having a wonderful time. And it's the last night. Last Sunday was the last night of the Masters. This Sunday is the last night of Books by the Beach. And we're very delighted to have with us Peter Guttridge, who... This book festival was your idea, I believe, and you have been the director of it for many years, and no one works harder, apart from your wonderful festival helpers, front of stage, than you. You are interviewing writers all through the week, and with most impressive workload, and I have to say, Peter looked after the section I was doing with Mr. George Costigan and Mr. Hugh Fraser this afternoon with effortless knowledge and charm, made the whole event much easier than it might have been. It was a delight to do. So, Peter, hello, good evening. Sorry to keep you up so late, but welcome to Partners in Crime.
Thank you very much. I'm just passing over the brown envelope stashed with money for those nice things you just said about me.
Yes, all donations welcomed. Where did you get the idea for this festival?
Well, what happened, the county council for the library service used to run a festival, and they decided they couldn't run it anymore. And I used to come up and interview people like you, august writers like yourself, for many years. And the local newspaper emailed me and said, the council is going to stop doing this festival, the county council is going to stop doing this festival. What do you think about that? And I said, well, I'm sure there must be a way to carry it on. And the next day, the headline in the Scarborough News was, Festival Host to Save Book Festival. And I had actually done I used to run a book festival in Brighton. I used to live down in Brighton. And I thought, I can do this. And but I was living in London. I do live in London. And I knew that the woman who'd been programming the other festival for the libraries was a wonderful woman, a very energetic woman who I know you know, called Heather French. Yes. And I phoned her up and I said, look, we could do this festival together. You can do all the legwork and I can just take the glory. And that's essentially what happened. So about 4 years ago, we started Books by the Beach, and we talked to the council, the town council, not the county. I know this is a really boring bit. The town council about what venues they got, and they got a Victorian prison. So I said, okay, can we use that? And they said, well, it's actually where the dust carts have got their rubbish. And I said, well, can we clear it out and we can use it? So we've been doing events there, and we've been finding other venues to do events. But then, so then we started the festival, which is not funded by anybody except ticket sales. So
I didn't know that.
We have to be very careful. We have some minor sponsors. There's a brewery that produces a bottle of beer, which you will probably have in a bag. You might.
I have a bottle of that. Yes,
I have a bottle of it.
The one for Hugh Fraser gave.
It'll be lucky to last the night.
Well, I hope so. It's a microbrewery, and they said, well, we're not going to give you any money, but we're going to do beers for you. And they did a bestseller beer in a cask, which was in all the pubs in Scarborough, and continues to be in all the pubs in Scarborough for the duration of the festival. And they do these special bottle beers, which they only produce a limited edition. And apart from that, we do it on the ticket sales. So we book you on the assumption you're going to bring in a lot of people.
I'm glad I know that now and not before
I was in your session. There were at least 3.
Empty seats, thanks.
Exactly. Actually, no. And so you have to be careful who you book. So you can't take too many chances. So you book people that you know are going to put bums on seats, and you figure out the ticket price so it's not going to be too onerous. People have got a finite amount of money, of course.
Yes.
And we have a fantastic audience in Scarborough, a fantastic appetite for listening to writers talking about their books, of all kinds of books, not just crime, all kinds. But crime is a preponderant theme in our festival for the last 4 years, partly because I'm a crime writer myself, and I love the genre, and I used to be the Observer's crime fiction critic for about 12 years, which has made me rather a sick man because I've read more crime fiction than is healthy for anyone.
You know who done it even before the author does.
Well, sadly I do, except in my own books.
Oh, well, I mean, that's an extraordinary thing because, you know, a lot of festivals exist through grants and various help from councils and whatever. So to actually make this festival so successful, and make no mistake, it is a wonderful festival. The people who've been attracted to it this year, you know, people like Jeremy Vine, people like, as you say, Earl Shriver, you've had Robert Goddard here.
Stella Rimington, the ex-head of MI5.
Stella Rimington. Yeah. We were perplexed greatly. We've got the timing wrong. We wanted desperately to see Stella Rimington. We thought she was on at 4, but she was on at 12. So we missed her. But being ex-Secret Service person,
we kept the time secret.
I thought there had been some disinformation.
I think she went off in a helicopter.
It was that was her going across the bay, was it? So I mean that's a phenomenal thing because it is very successful. And looking at the attendances today, there's no question that you've got a great groundswell of support in the town, and also Scarborough itself, as I was mentioning earlier, is an extraordinary town. You have Alan Ayckbourn. You use the Stephen Joseph Theatre. Yeah. You've just come hot from. I must point out to listeners that Peter's come hot hot foot from interviewing Ruth Jones at the Stephen Joseph Theatre, which again was packed out, and I should imagine she gave a wonderful performance, as she always does.
Ruth Jones was fantastic. The Stephen Joseph Theatre is fantastic, but as you will know, because you probably performed there, it's a theatre in the round, which is not the best place to do a book Q&A kind of interview, a jokey interview thing, because you've got people behind you, out to the side of you, who can't see everything very clearly. It's not perfect, but it was very popular. And Ruth, of course, he was a pro, and is very funny stories, and is a very kind of wacky individual.
She's a one-off, and I think I'm a huge fan of her.
Yeah,
I think
she they loved her as they loved you earlier, because you, despite what you said, you rude person, you were sold out. You three were sold out. You and George and Hugh Fraser, and it was a terrific event.
Even I had to sit at the back.
Yeah.
I did the whole "don't you know who I am" thing, but it didn't work.
Well, exactly. Well, that was good, but I mean, in a way, it would have been. I'm used to actually some people, in particular, being an actor, preferring the back of my head. I'm sure it's been said in the past. So, okay, you're based in London. You come up here, and you.
I am a Lancashire man originally, so I'm kind of, my heart is here. So I have to apologise when I appear in Scarborough. I have to say, I'm sorry, I'm from Burnley, but. Please forgive me, you Yorkshire people. Don't throw eggs at me. They still throw eggs at me, but
Where are you from in Lancashire?
Burnley.
Yeah,
I think he just said that.
Oh, did it? I missed that. I've got these headphones.
You're trying to think of your next question,
and I gabble a bit, so it's okay.
So you go from strength to strength. Have you had any festival highlights this year?
Apart from your event?
Well, that's very kind of you. Apart from us.
Well, I'm told that Jeremy Vine. And he did his own thing, so he didn't need someone like me to interview him. Was fantastic.
Yes.
He was a tour de force, and was much loved and sold loads of
But
books.
he is extraordinary. I mean, I've seen him with the swingometer on election nights. And
yes.
He's his brother. Obviously, Tim is a comedian, but he has a wonderful physicality, Jeremy, which actually came to the fore in Strictly Come Dancing. I seem to recall. I mean, he was a hugely popular.
I think you're right. Well, somebody who'd seen the gig said actually he was Peter Snow, because on stage he was doing the arms, he was doing all that. But no, he apparently was fantastic. I don't think we've had one that's been bad. I mean, that sounds kind of creepy to say, but it's true. But it's partly because the audience here is so receptive, and so that Yorkshire warmth, which is a cliche, but it's true. It's true, and they're just so up for having a good time. So even the rubbishest joke that you tell on stage is going to get a laugh, because it's like, yeah, we're liking this, we're having a good time here.
So I mean, with this festival, I mean, as you say, this is your creation, your baby, and Heather is now the director of it. And
Totally taken over now. She's doing a grand job. I consult,
and you consult. A huge success. Can you see this festival going on and on for many years?
Absolutely. We started it originally, and every year for the first 3 years we kept saying, shall we carry on? And then we said, of course we're going to carry on. It took about a minute to decide that. We used, in this very bar on a Monday morning, in the old days we had a weird system. It wasn't as sophisticated as it is now, and we took a lot of cash in, not laundering the money or anything, but we'd come in here, we'd sit at this very table, we'd be counting money from the book sales to see to figure out if we'd actually made any money, which we rarely do, or we make a pittance, but it's the fun of doing it. But every year we go, are we going to carry on? Of course we're going to carry on. Yeah, Heather's going to carry on, and if she decides that she's going to stop, I'll probably come back in and carry on doing it.
I wouldn't say that on microphone.
No, I will. No, she'll be happy for me to do it.
Well, I mean, it's a great team. The welcome we've had here is second to none.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here's a question. The success of literary festivals in the UK, and increasingly worldwide now, is a sort of fairly new phenomenon. It wasn't that long ago before it was in every paper you picked up it was the death of the book, and reading and everything's going to be the internet and visual stimulus, which of course is very much a part of our lives now. But books, they seem to go from strength to strength, and festivals also. Why?
I think there is this remarkable appetite And yeah, the death of the book was greatly exaggerated, as it turned out. And although publishers have been very clever, and what they're doing now, when they do produce an actual book rather than an e-book, they produce very beautiful books, and people want to possess them, as you know, because we all like beautiful things. Are you the man with the? No, you're not. It's all right. I was gonna mix you up with somebody else. So
I might be the man with the.
No, you are the man with the.
I got a very enigmatic stare.
There's a scandalous rumour, actually. He's not the man with the.
No, you're not the man with the.
I'm not, but I'm an actor, so I could be.
I'll come back to the man. I'll come back to the man with the later. But yeah, no. So they're beautiful objects. So you do want to possess them. But no, the appetite. I'm astounded. As a chairperson, interviewer on stage, I do Cheltenham, and I do Edinburgh, and I do Hay, and I do some pretty big festivals where they have 500 events, and at any given hour they've got probably 5 events going on at the same time, each of which will have somewhere between 200 and 500 people in the audience. If you think about the number of people that are going, the footfall, as I think they call it these days, the footfall on that is thousands of people. The appetite for people to see writers talking about their work is undiminished. And I think it's partly, I mean, you must get the same as an actor, that people want to know about you. They see you as a character, but they want to know about you. And it's the same with authors.
Yes.
And when Lionel Shriver was on stage the other night, and Lionel is a fierce intellect, which is, you think, my goodness, I better be sure I step up to the mark here. And I was interviewing her, and I think I stepped up to the mark. She will tell you better. She might tell you different. But she said that she doesn't want to talk about herself. She wants her books to stand up for themselves. But readers don't want the books to stand up for themselves. They want to know about the writers.
Yes, they do.
And I think that's the fascination.
That always fascinates me, because it's something I've seen myself. I mean, for example, I send out an email, a newsletter to my readers fairly often, and the ones that always get the most response are the ones that have got some personal thing in them. And for example, when my son was born, I sent a photo around and announced the birth to the readers, and cause I treat them as friends, and I got something like 3,500 emails back from people.
Well, I think people love that personal touch. It makes them feel a bit closer in a relationship between reader and writer. The actual, obviously, personal relationship for historically has been very distant, and it's got much closer. And obviously, media, and in particular these festivals, bring that relationship, but form other relationships with your readers. But I sometimes feel, I don't know how you feel about this, Peter. There is a great pressure now on writers to not only just write good books, but to get out there and talk about
to be performers.
Books. And there must be many writers who feel very uncomfortable going to a festival and talking about their books, or going on the radio, or doing all the things that are expected of writers to promote and market their books now. I sometimes, it must be awkward, if someone turns up at a festival and they've agreed to do it, because I'm not saying there's any example that you'll know of, but I sometimes worry. I have seen this myself, where someone has turned up because they had to, and they really couldn't do it. They had stage
introvert and extrovert.
They had all those sort of things. So I sometimes think, I feel sorry for certain writers who it's not in their makeup to express themselves in person, and they literally do it through the words on paper.
No, exactly. I think you're absolutely right, and it's interesting because, in the old days, writing appealed to introverts, and they didn't want to be out there at all. No. You're quite right. And I'm frantically trying to rack my brain. It's late in the evening. The woman who wrote Hotel du Lac, which won the Booker Prize, Anita Bruckner, never did any public events ever, because she was shy, and she thought, I'm not going to put myself through this, and she was successful enough that she didn't have to. But it is, and I've in my fairly extensive experience of interviewing people on stage, I've met a few people who it was like pulling teeth, getting stories out of them, because they would answer monosyllabically, and you needed to figure out a way. But it's a training thing. I mean, obviously for you and for an actor, it's dead easy. And you're a very funny man, and you've got some great. No, I'm serious. And you've got some very good stories. And you've got some very good stories to tell. That's the other thing. But I think it's not difficult for a writer to figure out eventually that okay, they need to have some anecdotes. They need to be entertaining. They need to be intelligent. They need to be inspiring. But essentially, it's a show. Yes. A book festival event is a show, and it needs to be entertaining. And the audience has paid money, and they want to be entertained.
Yes, they do.
You know, it's not show business exactly, because it's more highfalutin than that in a way. But they need to know that. But you're right, it's a nightmare for some people.
Well, it is, because as Adam says, people love the personal touch. They love the things that they are finding out from you in person that they didn't know before, or the little candid moments and the interaction between actors. I mean, I think that's what makes these festivals so popular, is getting closer to people's favourite authors, discovering new authors through their books, but also discovering them as people in real life as well. And that must be behind this generation of such successful festivals like yourself. So, at home, crime writer yourself, can you tell us something about your next book? Turning the tables now, late in the day.
Interviewee turns interviewer.
I've written 14, 15 books by now. I've been doing. I wrote a trilogy set in Brighton. Now, there's another Brighton writer called Peter James, who is very successful.
He's been on the show. Yeah.
Never heard of him.
I know, and he gives you. He gives you
He's
very
been
nice.
very kind to me.
I've known Peter for a long time. In fact, he gave me a blurb on my second novel back in '97, a long time ago, because we lived in adjacent villages, and I was shameless about going down and putting a letter through his letterbox saying, "You don't know me, but well, actually you do know me, because I've interviewed it, because I was a journalist at the time. But I've got this book. If you like it, then will you blurb it?" And he blurbed it. If I'm allowed to use that phrase.
Yeah, it's one of my favourites. I like it.
So I wrote this trilogy set in Brighton, which is essentially a kind of history of crime in Brighton from. Well, it's not sequential, it's not chronological, but it goes from kind of 1914 through to now, and it starts in the 1930s with an unsolved real crime, which Graham Greene was suspected of committing, and then it moves into the present day, and then it moves back into the 60s for the gangsters in the 60s, and then it moves back to the First World War and brings it forward. And I was so pleased with this trilogy, and it's very complicated, and the readers after the end of the first one said, "We can't be asked." Can I use that language?
Yes, you can.
We can't be asked carrying on with this, because nobody told us it was a trilogy, because my publishers didn't say it's a trilogy. So they bought the book thinking it was going to be self-contained. And I thought I'd done enough resolutions at the end of the first book and leave some things hanging in the air, but readers thought I hadn't done all the resolutions, which I haven't, because I knew that I was going to resolute them. However, having said that, when the second one came out, which is called The Last King of Brighton, which I nicked from The Last King of Scotland, it's about a gangster in 60s. I
don't think anyone will notice.
Yeah, well, they will now. Which is set in the 60s in Brighton, which is a very interesting period. My publishers phoned me up and they said, "So can we do a contract for you for books 4 and 5?" And I said, "Well, it's a trilogy. I've figured it out as a trilogy. I'm an artist. I'm not. I'm not just a hack. It's a trilogy." And they offered me a certain amount. And I said, "Yeah, I can do 4 and 5." Anyway, so my next novel is book 6 of the Brighton trilogy.
Wow! So this really has grown into a series.
Yeah, and it's called Swimming with the Dead, and it's about cross-channel swimming. And it's about how easy it is, because of the nature of the swim and the amount of food they've got to ingest every 2 hours, liquid food, to do their 15-hour swim across the channel, which is a fairly phenomenal thing. It's about committing a murder, which could be just a heart attack. And so there's a serial killer killing off cross-channel swimmers. I know.
Don't tell David Williams.
Exactly. Well, he wore a wetsuit, so he cheated. The real cross-channel swimmers, they just wear trunks.
Do they grease themselves?
They don't. No.
They
the only bits they grease with Vaseline, actually, are the.
We don't need to hear this bit.
No. I thought that when I first said it, I thought the same. No, it's the bits they're going to chafe. And with men, it actually is down there with their trunks. With women, it tends to be where their breasts are and under their arms there, because they're going to be doing that. But no, they don't. The grease doesn't do anything. They always thought it did. It doesn't keep you warm.
That is one of the most extraordinary and wonderful conceits for a novel and a murder mystery I think I have ever heard.
Well, it comes out later this year, and but I used to do these comic novels, and at Bristol Crime Fest, which is a fantastic crime fest, which you should be at, which runs in May, so it's probably too late. Well, it is too late for this year, but you should go next year. Which is like Harrogate, which is the big one, the diamond in the crown or the jewel in the crown. Bristol is equally good, but not as well known. They've been going for 10 years, and they've got a short story anthology, and I've brought back my comic characters who I've not written about for 15 years for a short story in this anthology in Bristol.
So what now, listeners who are going to go out and buy your books, as I am, because if the rest of the plots are as good as the last one sounds, well, it's not the last one, it's number 6. What's the first novel called?
In the trilogy, it's The City of Dreadful Night, which is a Ponzi title, but it's a Victorian poem, and it's about Brighton.
And your latest book is going to be
Swimming with the Dead, and that's contemporary. Yeah,
that's contemporary.
That's totally contemporary.
So you've done 78 years.
I've been
through the book.
But I was late being published. I was like 45 before I got published. I've been trying for 20 years, so it's such a thrill. I remember when my first book came out, which is a comic novel, No Laughing Matter, which is set in the comedy industry, which I used to write about as a journalist. I remember going up to Edinburgh to do my first ever gig like you did today, and I got off the plane, and in the bookshop there was my books had this No Laughing Matter had a vomit green cover. It was a disgusting cover, and because it was a comic novel, and it was plastered all over the windows of the bookshop on Edinburgh at Edinburgh Airport. And I went inside, and there was a big pile of the books on the table, and I was looking at these books, which unusually didn't have an author photograph in it, because I thought that I think because they thought my face wouldn't sell really, so best they did not have my face in it. So I'm looking at these books, and the manager comes over and she says, "Are you Peter Guttridge?" And I said, "Well, yeah, how do you know?" Because there was no photo in the book. And she said, "It's the way you're stroking that novel."
There's many an author who will recognise that particular gesture. And I think it's talking to two of them here. Oh,
on that note.
Oh, well, Peter, thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry I burbled on.
You haven't burbled on. You've
fantastic,
been brilliantly entertaining. Thank you for looking after us so well. We've loved coming to your festival. And good luck in future years. And we will,
thank you.
We will return as visitors to see.
No, I'm guaranteeing you're coming back to do events.
Oh, well,
I'm guaranteeing that.
That really would be
in my consultant role, I'm guaranteeing you.
Well, lovely. I've heard it from the governor. That's absolutely perfect. Thank you so much. Everyone who's listened to that, you've heard about Peter's books, you've heard about this wonderful festival, Books by the Beach. This year is over, but another year begins. So this time next year, keep your eyes out for this extraordinary festival on the east coast of Yorkshire in Scarborough. And so it's good night from the Crescent Hotel. Good night, Peter. Good night, Adam. Good night, Bob.
Well, we are back in the very same seats where we started when we introduced this podcast. We're next to the fish tank with a view out to sea that I can't see now because it's actually dark.
This detail is wonderful. It's what makes you a great writer.
Well, make them imagine they're here. But no, it's been an absolutely fantastic experience here at Books by the Beach. We had, in fact, 3 or 4 partners in crime listeners who were in the audience just for your session today, who came up to say hello, which is absolutely fantastic.
And it was lovely to meet them, and it would be lovely to meet you all if I get the chance.
Yes, I was Alison Waterfield, who
yes.
came to say hello, and a couple of I'm dreadful with names, but
well, at this time of night we are looking at it after 11 o'clock on Sunday evening.
Yes, and after a couple of glasses of red wine. But thank you to everyone who did come up and say hello, and thank you also to anyone who's got in touch with us recently. You can email us if you want to get in touch. It's hello@partnersincrime.online. We're on Twitter @CrimeFicPodcast, and on facebook.com/partnersincrime-podcast. And we had a message from Gwyn Cooper Flynn, who quite often retweets us and
she does.
And gets in touch on Twitter. She's a big fan of the podcast and absolutely fantastic. She says, "I absolutely love these podcasts. I wouldn't miss them for the world. I love crime fiction and read it voraciously. I adore your books and have read both your bibliographies of publications at least twice. See the way I started with the compliment. It's not my first rodeo. Anyway, I'm sure my suggestion has been made already, but it would be lovely to hear from Ian Rankin. And I think it would be great if you interviewed each other, as both of you have had interesting paths to becoming a novelist. Anyway, that's my tuppence worth. Cheers, and I look forward to more excellent podcasts.
Well, thank you very much, Gwen. That's very nice of you. And at the risk of us sounding like Steve Wright in the afternoon, the wonderful Steve Wright in the afternoon, we listen to
Serious
the
dropping.
big show all the time. Thank you for that praise. It's we blush.
Ian Rankin, that's somebody we need to speak to and try to get on the podcast.
The great Ian Rankin himself. Well, that's the gauntlet is down. We will do what we can, Gwyn, and hopefully we will be able to persuade.
I'll get my people to speak to his people.
Yes. I mean, it would be lovely to have him. We're great admirers of his work, to say the very least. So we're on it. That is our challenge.
And an interesting suggestion to interview each other as well. We did something similar a couple of years ago. We did a video chat, didn't we? I think it's for a launch of one of my books. We had an hour-long chat about.
We got about 10
crime,
minutes in, and we both fell asleep. I seem to recall.
It was kind of a pilot thing for this podcast. Right. In fact,
I think that's where
we got the idea.
That's where the germ of the idea began. I think.
Well, maybe we should do something similar. If we start to get turned down by potential interviewees.
It's a very nice suggestion, but I'm sure you probably hear enough of our voices droning on this podcast as it is. But thank you for the suggestion.
Shall we give them a week off then? Shall we?
Well, you're having a week off anyway. You're on holiday.
Shall we disappear for another week and
yes, okay,
and come back? Because on next week's episode we have the wonderful, irrepressible Angela Marsons.
Now, plus.
Yes. Oh yes, Angela Marsons plus another very special guest.
Yes.
Who you'll hear about on next week's episode. So
well, you're off on holiday. I'm off home because I've got work to do. So it's as the sun sets slowly in the west, we bid our farewells to sunny Scarborough, and look forward to our return as soon as possible.
Same time next year.
Why not?
Partners in Crime was presented by Adam Croft and Robert Dawes and produced by Adam Croft. The theme tune was by the Caesareans. The Partners in Crime logo and imagery were designed by Stuart Beisch. Partners in Crime is sponsored by Kobo, your favourite local bookshop, perfected.